So I just want to make a few mentions about Grace. She's an incredible woman, as you will soon discover. So Grace was born in Vacaville, California, to Japanese immigrant parents and grew up in Northern California. She had a lifelong passion and interest in nursing that led her to pursue a career in nursing by entering the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center School of Nursing. And Grace was actually enrolled in school and studying to be a nurse when Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7th, 1941. And much like 120,000 plus people of Japanese ancestry living in the West Coast, Grace and her family were forcibly removed from their home and sent first to Turlock Assembly Center and later to Gila River Relocation Center. Grace's passion for nursing didn't end there, and she continued to work as a nurse's assistant at both Turlock and Gila River. But an interesting turn in Grace's story, at least interesting to all of us, I'm sure, is that before the end of the war, she left Gila River early to study nursing at St. Mary's School in Rochester, Minnesota, which then helped her enlist in the US Cadet Nurse Corps, where she then served as a senior cadet nurse at the Army Hospital in Clinton, Iowa, for the last 6 months of the war. And while there's so much more that I could say about Grace, she's sitting right next to me right now, and I think it'd be best if you heard her story from her herself. So why don't we all give Grace a warm welcome to the Japanese American National Museum.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's so nice to be here, and I might say I'm 92 years old, so if you see me doddering around. but Thelma Robinson, who had written the first book about the Cadet Nurse Corps program, and unfortunately she wasn't able to be here, but it was truly a honor that when she wrote her book, and when she was writing about the Cadet Nurse Corps program, realized how many Japanese American cadet nurses there were in the program. And there was over 400 of us at that time. And so there it was. And she then wrote a book about the cadet nurses, and with patriotism in spite of prejudice. And this program was a very important program during World War II. It wasn't well publicized because it wasn't with the military, and it was not considered under the Army Nurse Corps program, but the U.S. Public Health Service. And so there it was. And so Thelma and her sister, Pauli Perry, wrote this very informative and important book about the Corps. Unfortunately, as we said, Thelma wasn't able to be here to share with you about her books because it was just very, very informative and all. So I might say here that, excuse me, that the surgeon, about the Cadet Nurse Corps program, Surgeon General Thomas Perrin of the U.S. Public Health Service was quoted back in 1944 saying that in America today there is a dangerous shortage of nurses, with thousands called to service in the armed forces and in civilian hospitals, war plants, clinics, and public health centers, particularly in overcrowded war production centers. Nurses in every increasing number are needed at once. And that was from the Surgeon General of the Public Health Nurse. The war had now progressed and continued in heights demand for the nurses, both civilian and military and all. And the nursing education in the early years of the war had provided training for over 6,000 nurses, but a greater number of nurses was truly needed to avert the crisis. One public health official warned that we could lose the war on the home front due to the lack of care for our citizens. And so President Roosevelt in 1944 signed a law into a bill that created the Nurse Training Act, which created the US Cadet Nurse Corps program, and that this would be under the Surgeon General of the United States Public Health Service. And it was just really something. And I would just going to say that my parents came from Japan over 100 years ago, and that was what we were told, that they both, my father was educated as a lawyer, and my mother was a middle school home economics teacher. And they came from Akita in Japan, both of them. And so there they came, and then all of us were born, of course, in the United States. And this is something that my sister, and then 4 brothers, and myself, and I was the youngest of the family, and all that. And I don't know whether they have the photo of the family or not, but anyway, it was, oh yeah, that's Mom and Dad when they came from Japan and all. And so that was what it was. And then it was just really something. And the cadet, as I said, the program wasn't publicized much due to the fact that it wasn't with the Army Nurse Corps, but all of these soldiers and all of the people who were involved realized how many of the nurses had left the hospitals and other units to help with the Second World War II. And it's, when she was, the war had, excuse me, the war had gone on, but briefly, this act provided for uniformed cadet nurses and all the accredited schools of nursing that met certain standards and were eligible to apply for funding. The 3-year program provided basic training, accelerated to 30 months, as well as 6-month period when the senior cadets, the last 6 months, would serve in federal or non-federal hospitals or health agencies. And the Cadet Nurse Corps was an opportunity for the 17 and 18-year-old women to serve in the uniformed service. And all the other uniformed services of the women required them to be at least 20 years old. I was 21 when I was started my nursing. In August, the Nursing Council for War Services invited dignitaries to a fashion show, and they wanted to have an official uniform for the Cadet Nurse Corps. And it was important that the uniform be really style right and charming, and it would catch the eye of 65,000 young women as a recruitment strategy. And then they also had the beret, which was against like Britain's General Montgomery. And also the Maltese Cross became the insignia of the Cadet Nurse Corps and was worn on the left shoulder, both in the outdoor and indoor uniforms that we were given. And this is the one that I took off my jacket. You know, it's just really something that was very important. The U.S. Cadet Nurse, we want you to know that this was not a segregated program. It was open to all ethnic groups. There were 124,000 cadet nurses attending the 1,125 participating schools, and this was in 1945. And some schools, of course, when they were accepting students, did show some discrimination, but there were 400 Japanese American cadets. And I might add, too, that there were 2,000 black cadets, mostly in the black schools, and American Indians, and male nurses, but they weren't accepted very graciously. And there weren't many male nurses in the Cadet Nurse Corps. And then many of the Nisei's students came directly from camp because some of them were still in camp. Some from other jobs, they changed because, and like myself, I was already in nursing school education on. Because it was excuse me, it was really something. Briefly, this act provided for a uniform cadet nurse corps, and all accredited schools of nursing had to meet the standards which were eligible to apply for funding, and the 3-year program provided basic training and all. And so it was. The Maltese Cross, yes, that to us was a very, very important thing. The private sector, too, helped with recruitment because they felt that nurses definitely were needed. And so they would try to get high schools and libraries and many other job places to have them go into future nursing because this education was being paid by the public health department. So, when you think about it, little can one realize what your future holds and all. I was the youngest of 5 children, and from the time that my sister Mary, 10 years older than I was, started attending Berkeley, Cal, and knew that I also wanted to attend Cal, be educated as a nurse. Fortunately, I was accepted in pre-nursing program at university and then in the School of Nursing in 1941. And so it was. With the family, all of us, we were told that education was so important, and all of us had the privilege of attending college and all. Then, with the bombing of Pearl Harbor, though, USF schools of nursing had 22 nurses at that time. And of course, the cadet nursing program had not started yet and all. Being a student nurse, we were sent to camp, and was able to work at the camp medical center, taking care of the people there and under the supervision of doctors and nursing supervisors and all that, caring for the needs of the patients that were sent to camp at that time. But we were wondering what our future would hold, and I so wanted to finish my nurse's training. By the time we were able to leave camp, my former UCSF school nursing roommate and I had made some applications for several nursing schools, but many were still not open to us at that time. And I think that there's clippings of but already I had one brother who was in the military because under selective service, he was to serve for a year or so, and it would have been over in January when Pearl Harbor happened in December. But as I said, we made applications for several nursing schools, but many of them still were not open to us. And some said the quota of our type were filled for the year. And some said they didn't think that the community was ready to accept us. And some said they didn't think the patients would accept us. This is before the Cadet Nurse Corps program. But anyway, we were able to leave camp, so with our FBI clearance, we left camp. And in April of 43, we went out as cook and housekeeper with the understanding to the people that if we're accepted at any school of nursing, we would be leaving them because we did not want to have them think that we would be their cook and housekeeper for the rest of our lives, too. So there we were in Lake Forest, Illinois. And then we were finally accepted by the St. Mary's School of Nursing in Rochester, Minnesota, Of course, that's where the Mayo Clinic is, and it was just a wonderful place to be and all. And it's, excuse me, this, as a member of the US Cadet Nurse Corps program, the stipulation was that after finishing our training, we had to stay in nursing. That was the reason that we had to sign that when we signed up this Cadet Nurse Corps program, because it was being paid by the public health law. And so it was that Marie and I had our pre-nursing classes in colleges before public health, but we took all our required courses at St. Mary's, and of course courses of nursing arts, science courses, chemistry, microbiology, psychology, and sociology, and basic parent care. And it was that along with that, we had to work on the wards, and so that made a busy time for us to be attending the classes. As far as discrimination at St. Mary's, I only remember one thing that happened when we were on the wards working, and one man, I heard, I was not in the room at that time, but I heard this gentleman's voice say, "No Jap nurse is going to take care of my wife." And immediately the hospital supervisor got the Japanese American cadet nurses out of that ward so that it would not be held responsible for the anger of this gentleman. And we later found out that his son had been killed in the war, so we could understand why he was sorely angry with any Asian-faced nurse in the hospital had lost many nurses, who had joined and Army Nurse Corps and other units to help with the war. And at St. Mary's, we had a large class of cadet nurses students. And as I said, it was something that we were Nisei cadets and all. But I might add that Rochester was just south of Minneapolis and all. And if you recall hearing the fact that there was Fort Snelling and Camp Savage up north of us there, and many MIS boys and soldiers were up there. And it was really something. My brother Ben, who had volunteered from camp, was training there. And as I said, there were many Nisei soldiers, and many from our camp in Gila, Arizona, where I had been, and other former friends and all, and from good old pre-war days and all. And so there we were. Our social life as Nisei cadet nurses became active and busy at times now. And so we were very happy about that. And my brother Ben would wire me and say, "See you this weekend, +4, which meant that 4 GIs would be coming down with him. And we student nurses, if we were working, well, we always knew that there was other nurses that could join the fellows and enjoy their friendship and all. And it was just really very, very nice for us. And also it was very, very nice for the GIs that came down to be with us, because they knew that a lot of us, they also were familiar with and knew us at that time. In fact, I married one of those. So anyway, we went on social outings, picnics, movies, sports, games, church, making new friends, possibly visiting with the soldiers in Minneapolis. We went up there times when we were invited up there. And so it was very nice for the Nisei cadet nurses. And we thank the MISGIs that came down to visit us and all. It was that we just really had a wonderful, wonderful time. As stated during the last 6 months of our training as senior cadets, we could serve in different hospitals or health agencies. As I had two brothers serving in the military, as I said, my brother Ted, who was already in the military before Pearl Harbor, and my brother Ben. He had volunteered from Gila camp. And I might just mention that he stayed in for 25 years, came out a lieutenant colonel, and is now buried at Arlington Cemetery. And also it was that, when the last 6 months of my training came about, they wanted to know if I wanted to stay in public health or stay at the hospital itself or to some other industrial area where they needed nurses. I asked to be sent to a military hospital. And I said, I have two brothers in the U.S. military service, and I want to be at an Army hospital. So, fortunately, I was stationed at Shick General Army Hospital in Clinton, Iowa, where I was accepted and trained with the Army Nurse Corps nurses, along with there were two other Nisei cadet nurses that went also to the Army hospital. And it was really something, because there we were. We ate and slept, trained with the Army Nurse Corps members. And as we were considered officers' candidates, while we were there, we lived in the officers' quarters, trained with them, and did everything that the Army nurses were doing at that time. And we helped the nurses returned injured and sick from the war fronts, and also local soldiers in need of help physically, mentally, emotionally. And we even had some soldiers who had been prisoners of war patients in Japanese hospitals when the war ended, when that occurred. And these were our soldiers who had been prisoners of war in Japan, who had been on the Bataan March. Well, the Army nurse captain in charge was so concerned about our safety, and she said that we Japanese American cadet nurses were not to report to hospital duty without an escort from our officers' quarters to the hospital and back to the end of our duty hours and for our safety, as they didn't know how the returning patients who had been prisoners of war and in Japanese hospitals would react having another Asian-faced nurse take care of them when they got back to the United States and all. When several of our ambulatory patients that we had been taking care of heard this, they immediately reported to the captain and offered to be our escorts and said that they will come in the morning, get us to the hospital, and at the end of our shift, they would get us back to the officers' quarters and all. And also, since they were ambulatory, and they would keep an eye on the situation to see that we would be safe. And it touched us deeply, as it made us feel that they themselves had accepted us as fellow American citizens and loyal nurses and all. And it was just really, really something. It was such a heartwarming experience, and I will forever be grateful to our government and the US Cadet Nurse Program, which had been starting to help educate the many nurses who were needed for our country during World War II. And training at an Army hospital was really a nice experience. It was new and different, the environment, of course, and experience. We were trained and worked with a wonderful group of Army nurses and medical staff, caring for our patients and all. And it was just something that we could at times corrected for our conduct and reminded that we were in the Army now and all. And so it was. But, you know, taking care of these soldiers, it was listening to them. They're telling us what happened to them and all that. And we socialized with them. And we also got to meet their families and all. And it was just really a fun experience, plus being very, very heartwarming. And I might say that Iowa State was a dry state. And the boys in the hospital wanted some liquor sometime. And so they would pay us to go over to Illinois, get a cab for us, and to buy liquor there, because that was not a dry state. And so we'd have to go out of uniform and sneak over to Illinois, get the liquor for the boys, and it was really a fun experience. And we never got caught on that either. So, and then on Saturday nights, the ambulatory patients could go out and be free to enjoy going to this town. There were restaurants and places to go and things, socializing and all. And so the ambulatory patients who were in the hospital at that time would, when the soldiers went out, would short sheet the beds and all. And there they were. And also they had water-filled beddings. And this, I might say, was that the extra condoms that they had around there were filled with water and put on the beds and all. And then the ambulatory patients would come back to the hospital and find their beds covered with water-filled buckets and stuff, plus short-sheeted. And it was really hilarious because we would stand there and say, "Don't break any of those balloons, because if the bed's wet, you're going to have to sleep on it." So we did have some fun on that kind of things too. And then, as I said, we were considered officers' candidates. And Obata Amemiya, who I had met at University of California back in 1938 and all, and he was at, and he used to come down to Rochester to visit with me and all. And he was on his way to Japan for his service of a year and a half in military intelligence. So on his way to San Francisco, he visited me at the Army Hospital. And it was really something because I had to report to the captain, nurses, and ask for permission if I could have men come on the wards to visit me there. And she said, "Is he a commissioned officer?" And I said, "No, he was a sergeant." And they said, "I'm sorry, but he cannot come on the grounds to visit you." And so I'm saying, what else can I say, you know? But yes, ma'am. And so then she looked at me and said, "Grace, get out of uniform and go out there and see your friend." And so we spent a lovely day together out of uniform and on his way to Japan at that time. So anyway, that was something that, of course, he wanted to become engaged. And I said, "No." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, you're going to Japan, and you know, they're short of men out there, and the women will most likely will be working in your offices and all, and you may meet some wonderful, wonderful, sweet gal who would be a subservient wife for you." And he said, "Oh," and said, he didn't know, you know. But anyway, I said, "No, I won't." And he said, and I said, and you know that I'll never be a subservient wife myself. And I never was. But anyway, he came back without finding a nice subservient wife. So he never had a subservient wife to be married to. But and the soldiers on the ward were just really fun. And the nurses were so nice. And my maiden name, as you can see, was Obata, O-B-A-T-A. And so one of the soldiers said, Miss Obata, are you Irish? And I said, yeah, I spell my name O''B-A-T-A. And they said, oh? Well, you look Asian. And I said, yeah, my mom was Japanese. They said, well, where did your mom meet your dad? And I said, well, he was an Irish fisherman, and he ended up in Hawaii. And my mother was a school teacher from Japan and had gone to Hawaii to teach. And that's where they met, and they were married and came to the United States. And that's where all of us were born. And, oh, and so anyway, that was the big joke around the whole, because these fellows would always tell these stories on to the other fellows. And so after that day, they never, whenever they needed me, it was never Miss Obata or Grace. It was, hey, Irish, you know. And I said, yeah, Irish. But I might add that the fellow I married later on, his birthday was on St. Patrick's Day. So I feel that, you know, it was legitimate at that time. But we helped these soldiers, and they did a lot of talking. They had to let themselves talk about the things that they had gone through, and many of them who had lost so many things and all. But anyway, it was just an experience that I will always remember. And even after the war was over, and some of the soldiers that we had taken care of, we kept in touch with. And one of them, who knew about, well, by not getting engaged to men when he was on the way to Japan. And so when men came back from Japan and I was engaged, I dropped him a note, and he immediately sent me a congratulatory letter and a bouquet of roses. And he said, wonderful. And then another one whom I had been in touch with, we were saying we were getting engaged and married, he wrote me a wonderful, sweet letter, and then he enclosed a note to men. And he said, you have a fine nurse as a wife. You know, congratulations. And so I've always told men, well, you know, the soldiers used to think that I was a nice girl. So anyway, that was the way it was. And it's just a heartwarming experience, and I will forever, ever be grateful for our government and the US Cadet Nurse Corps and all. And we started to help educate. This program itself has been started to help educate the many nurses who are needed by our country during World War II and all. And this, it was, like I say, we trained at an Army hospital, and it was a new and different experience. We were trained and worked with a wonderful group of Army nurses and medical staff, caring for our patients. And there were times, however, that we cadets were conducted, as I said, reminding that we were in the Army now. And so it was that that was a way that we were on. And then all of a sudden, hundreds of radio stations across the nation were broadcasting appeals to young women to join the Cadet Nurse Corps, when suddenly, on August the 14th in 1945, all broadcasts were interrupted to announce that Japan had surrendered. The tightly wound spring of war mobilization was released, and recruitment to the Cadet Nurse Corps was terminated immediately. But the vast nurse training program could not close with a new piece. Still in training, there are over 10,000 cadet nurses and all. And also, they're about taking care of about 80% of the nursing cares here in the United States. And that was with over 1,000 hospitals and all. And President Truman set October 5th as the final date for the new admissions to the Corps. So that was October 5th, 1945. The present action meant that there was over 30,000 cadet nurses recruited by August at that time, but they were told that they would receive federal aid until their graduation. And they would receive all the benefits of the Corps with the exception of the uniform. So that's the way it was. But they all received this, because this was what the Cadet Nurse Corps, and it was just really something. And so it was. Excuse me. And of course they got their uniforms too, but it was a disappointment to the new cadet nurses. But there was once again a shortage after the war had ended of nurses as soldiers returned from the war needing rehabilitation and the baby boom, and now hospitalization insurance was available for, would you believe, 3 cents a day. And people were taking advantage of that throughout the country. Thelma Robinson, as I said, the dear, dear author of books and all, and she and her sister, as I said, really, really did a wonderful job of letting the public know what the Cadet Nurse Corps program was. And she was at a DAR conference, and she had given a program on it, and she thanked the chapter for submitting a resolution at their state convention. And the first was that cadet nurses serving under Surgeon General of the United States Public Health Service with prescribed uniform and an insignia. So there we were in uniform, even if we were not with the Army Nurse Corps. And so it was. And the second was, whereas there was no discrimination among the women in regard to race, color, and creed. And that was a very, very good point at that time. And the Bolton Act, named for the woman who submitted the bill, set a precedent by stating that there would be no discrimination in the administration of benefits, remembering that at this time military units were segregated, as were the Niseis at that time. In order to qualify for funds, School of Nursing had to abandon discriminatory policies, because this was something that you figure that that's how, like, over 25,000 blacks and 400 Japanese American who had been interned because of their ancestry were trained in the Corps and all. And then also they said that the third whereas was that the 124,000 senior cadet nurses, in addition to serving in civil hospitals, provided crucial nursing services to veteran hospitals at that time: Army, Navy, and Marine hospitals, Public Health Service, Indian Health Service from 43 to 38. And this is something that was really, truly a wonderful thing for all of us who were cadet nurses. And so it was. US Cadet Nurse Corps program, cadets served loyally and patriotically alongside the members of our military service, but have not received national recognition. as have the Army Nurse Corps. There is a beautiful World War II memorial in Washington, D.C., with a Freedom Wall of 4,000 stars representing the 400,000 we lost in World War II. This memorial recognizes the services of our military, as well as those who served in the home front, including Rosie the Riveter even. But our US Cadet Nurse Corps is not mentioned. However, we are given tribute at the Women's Memorial, and perhaps someday we too may be recognized for the services that we, along with the other patriotic members who also served and all. And it was just really, as a cadet nurse, we felt that we were helping in the World War II, helping with the soldiers, helping us to really get to really understand what the soldiers and their families were going through at that time. And we are now honorary members of the women's military, and the military in Washington, D.C., where cadet nurses are considered honorary members and all. And so we Japanese American cadet nurses of World War II served honorably and patriotism in spite of the prejudices that we had to live through. And just as all the other Nisei women who served patriotically in many other areas for the helping with the World War II. And so it is that we hope that, as Thelma has mentioned in her many books too, that we did our share in helping our boys throughout this, and to understand what a lot of the Japanese American families had to go through also at this time. But I might mention that this cadet nurse book, there was 19 of us interviewed for it, and it was just very, very, and like I said, patriotism in spite of prejudice and all. And then after that, she wrote a third book, and the cadet nurses of World War II. And I was privileged to be included in this book also. And so all the things that, like we said, you're in the Army now, but we really weren't at that time. And then one of the girls who was a cadet nurse, her uncle, I think, was here from Japan and read about what we had done and our cadet nurse program. And he went to Japan and printed the book in Japanese. So there's the same Nisei Cadet Nurse book in Japanese, published in Japanese. And I keep forgetting that you have to start at the back side of the book to all this. But so that they also had in print at that time, you know. But anyway, it's something that we are so gracious and so happy that Thelma Robinson and her sister thought so highly of the Nisei cadet nurses to do this for us. And she was so sorry. I was talking to her before this day, and she said she was so sorry that she couldn't be here to say thank you to the Nisei community for having those nurses helping out in World War II, you know. And it just, you know, it's something that, like I say, it was, I thought I wanted to be a public health nurse way back when I was 10 years old. But I too am proud of the fact that with my brothers in the military, and I was able to help out also at that time. And so it's just there's some photos of a family up, and we'll see what we have here. Yeah, flip. This is in 1930 that my dad, my mom, and all, when I was 10 years old, and my dad and my three brothers and my sister Mary and I, and it is something that Dad died about 2 months after that. He was only 50 years old, but he died of a heart attack. And that's what left my mother a widow, my sister to quit college and to help with care of us. And we went out and worked in the crops from the time school was out till school started in a small farming community of Vacaville. Even we'd pitch tents and just come home on weekends to take care of the house and all. And this is in 1941. This was before Pearl Harbor, and my brother Ted was in uniform already. And so he was in Berkeley, and my mom and my sister and my oldest brother was working in New York, and he was with the import-export business. So he's not in this picture, but that's that. And here are two of the Nisei rookies now training to be soldiers with machine guns at Fort Ord. And this Toshio Yoshida and my brother Ted. And it was just really something that when we had to go to camp, and these fellows who were training out in California were sent inland if they stayed in the military. And my brother Ted, as I said, was training as a machine gunner at that time. But when he was sent inland, he was put in an office filing at the military camp. But when they needed the soldiers, he finished up his machine gun training and was in a 4-4 unit at that time. And the up there is the UC San Francisco School of Nursing, and that was when I started after going to pre-nursing at Berkeley, California, and all. And then this was a graduation of St. Mary's School of Nursing in 1946, and that was when we were just and then these are just the fellows that were in Gila camp and that had volunteered for the military, and they were the ones that were in Camp Savage in Minneapolis, and of course we knew quite a few of those fellows because they were with us for many years. That's my brother Ben up there, and he was one. And we had many people who were against our boys joining the military. And my mother was ridiculed, and they'd say, "You are a widow, you don't have a husband, you already have one son in the military to be killed. Why are you sending another son to be killed?" And bless my mom, I just love her for it. She says, "They are American citizens of the United States of America, and I'm so proud of them." And I just thought that was such a wonderful comment for my mom to make at that time. And this is my brother Ben, who was in for 25 years, military intelligence, came out a lieutenant colonel, and is buried at Arlington Cemetery. And his widow is still living in Washington, D.C. area, but is in an assisted care facility. And that's just my husband, my brother Ted, and myself. And you can see that this is on shoulder of the cadet nurse uniform. And as I said, I wouldn't be, I said no, I would not become engaged. But this is when he came off the train, when he came back December of 46, and he came, and his family had relocated to California by then, and so that when they were discharging him. They were going to discharge him in San Francisco. And he said, no, I volunteered from Chicago. I want to be discharged in Chicago. And then he wanted to know if he could come to Cleveland, where I was working at that time. And it was so funny because I said, well, how'd you do this? He says, well, he says, I didn't have enough money to come to see you from San Francisco, but I figured I could do it from Chicago. So that's the way our engagement started at that time. And this is a wedding picture, and my mom made all the bridesmaids' dresses and all, and Min had brought back 10 yards of Japanese silks and from Kyoto. And I said, would your mom make your wedding dress for you? And of course my mother said, yes. And so I still have it. But anyway, that was one that was made from the Japanese silk satin. And so after we were married, I said to him, if I hadn't said yes and didn't marry you, and I wouldn't have used that 10 yards for a wedding dress, what would you have done with that 10 yards of silk? And he looked at me and said, it sure would have made a hell of a lot of handkerchiefs. But anyway, it's a wedding dress and all. So I was married in Cleveland, Ohio, and then he did, where I was nursing at that time, and then he went on to graduate school at Ohio State, got his master's and doctorate, and then we were just living in, we were married and living in till we were through with school. And his first job was in agriculture, USDA, and we were in Colorado and Fort Collins and all. And then while we were there, we had 2 sons, and the first one was, bless him, he was profoundly mentally disadvantaged. And so I quit nursing and took care of him. And our second son, Robert, here is with me. But anyway, that was, and Michael, our firstborn, was, did live to be, he just died in 2002. And they didn't expect him to live to be beyond infancy. So we were blessed. So we were very, very involved with Special Olympics as one of our projects and all. In fact, I have to go back to Iowa this week because the State Special Olympics is coming up this coming week, and I'll be volunteering for that. This is an apology from George Bush for what the government had done to us. And I think that many of you have seen it and all. And it was October of 1990. So that was really something. And also, and this is sort of not too long ago, but that was in the internment camp. That's our Michael, who passed away, and our son Robert and his wife, Pat, who was unable to be with us because she was babysitting 2 dogs, and so she didn't get to be here. And then Min passed away just about 2 months after that. Picture was taken after our 53rd wedding anniversary. And so we've lived a wonderful, full life, full of special things that we have done, and so glad that we're able to do it. This is Japanese American Memorial in Washington, D.C. I don't know whether you've all been able to see that, but that was a very, very nice memorial. And I might say that Min was gone by then, but he was in the topaz, and these were the big stone things there. And so anyway, And I might say that when this book, this cadet nurse book was, had a book signing, Thelma Robinson had it in San Francisco at the Japanese Museum there. And so I flew out there for that too. And the University of California School of Nursing invited us for coffee after the reception. And it was just really something, because Zena Mirsky, who was the Associate Dean of Nursing, realized that I was the only cadet nurse that was written up in the book from the University of California School of Nursing. And she had listened to my story of how I so wanted to be a nurse from the time I was 10 years old and get my degree at Cal. And it was at St. Mary's School of Nursing. Yes, I got my diploma there, but there was not a college, and so I didn't get my degree. And so she and two others worked for 3 years to try to talk the Board of Regents into having honorary degrees given to us. And so, and about 3 years later, she called and said, "Can you come out and speak to the Board of Regents?" And so I said, yes, I could. And it was just really something, because after I got there, the next day we were to meet with the Board of Regents. They said, "You're speaking for all the Nisei students. There are 750 of us at the 4 campuses of the University of California at that time." And so it was just a very humbling experience. So in 2009, we got an honorary degree from the UC, and I got mine from UCSF School of Nursing as all. And then, of course, we're going to St. Mary's, and although this is a Cal graduation in 2009, and Robin Patter there, and Zena Mirsky was there. This one was that I went to our 65th class reunion in Rochester, Minnesota, and it was just really something, because there were only 3 of us of that had been at the reunion at that time. And I happened to be there, and I was able to, the other 2, every 5 years, they would honor the graduating classes, and that 65 was our turn again to become honored. And at the banquet, they always asked someone to speak to you, the group. And the other 2 gals said, "We've done it before, but Grace, you've never done it before." So I said, okay, and got up, and it was really a stirring situation, because I was able to, at that time, thank the St. Mary's School of Nursing for having had over 40 Nisei cadet nurses during World War II, and that how much they had done for us in the Cadet Nurse Corps and all. And it was a wonderful experience to be able to, even if we only had 3 classmates there at that time. Anyway, that's it. That's the end of it all. So thank you so very much. And if there's any questions or anything, I'd be glad to answer them, or if you have anything. And they said that I think they said that this book has been being sold at the museum here. So I think they were saying that it was going to out in the lobby, that they were selling that book and all. But anyway, we thank you so very much, and all of you who also helped with the World War II effort. God bless.
Did you want to sit down?
Oh, thank you.
He wants the chair. All right, I'll move the mic for you, okay? I'll move the mic for you. So we'll be starting the Q&A in just a moment, so think of any questions that you might have.
Question.
Nope.
Was a cadet nurse the same as an RN?
What, would you repeat the question? Would you repeat the question? 'Cause he's asking a question. He did right now.
Yes.
What did he say?
The question was the cadet nurse program the same as an RN?
No. You had to register an RN. You had to go back to the state that you lived in, and if you're not working there, if you have a cadet RN. But I got my RN.
Here, do you want to use this microphone?
I had to register in Cleveland, Ohio, so I had a Cleveland registered nurse. So, and this is something that a lot of them were not registered nurses. And you had nurse aides and things like that. And also, it wasn't all of us weren't in the hospital working either, so.
Are there any other questions in the audience?
Do you remember your pay?
Oh.
Did I what?
Do you remember your pay?
Remember my what?
Your pay?
Pay?
Yes, your
Well, it
paycheck.
wasn't very much, but then we got free board and room, and school gave us $25 when we left school, and but when you figure that we got uniforms, we got to keep our uniforms, and I might say that many of them had kept their uniforms, still have them, just like a lot of the soldiers have, but after many years, not many years, but after the 4 years, my uniform went to Japan to my family because they were in need of winter clothing. And I said that I would send my uniform so they'd have a extra bit of clothing to wear. So that's why I took off the insignia and sent my clothing to my family in Japan.
Okay, I saw another question up front. Do you mind if I run the mic over to?
What?
We have another question.
What's the first question?
Well, let's find out. Can I borrow the mic for just a second so we can?
Huh?
Oh, can I borrow the microphone?
Oh, surely, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. No worries.
Thank you. You mentioned that you're from a Gila camp. And when did you leave the camp?
In the Gila camp for a year.
The other mic's not working.
I left the Gila camp in April of '43, and I went as a cook out of camp as a cook and Marie was the housekeeper. That's when we went to Lake Forest, Illinois, working for the vice president of the paper mill company.
I coincidentally left Gila in 1943, April '43. I went out to the University of Denver in Colorado, but the reason why I bring it up is I knew a young lady in Gila who also left camp and became a nurse. And I was just wondering if you knew her. Her name was Kathleen Iseri.
Yes, I knew Isobel.
You knew her?
I'm sure that's the name of one of the nurses. Where did she do her training?
I'm not sure. I didn't follow her. The reason why I knew she went out, her brother was my friend.
Oh,
Ken.
yeah. That name sounds very familiar. But I apologize, being that quite a few years ago, and I can't recall. since I hadn't kept in touch with her. You know.
Like you, I'm 92 myself, and so I thought maybe you would know.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't. You know.
Okay, do you want to take a seat? Here. Can you hold on to the microphone?
What else?
Oh, no, just.
Any other questions?
Oh, are there any other questions in the audience? Yes.
When you left Gila in 43, did you have to fill out a loyalty questionnaire?
Yeah, no. They had the questionnaires, and they sent people to, what camp was it? Yeah, and but there were no, and also it was just like I said, that a lot of them that wouldn't go into the military, and all. But as I said, my family, two of them were into the military and all. But and then when you think of like in the hospital, when we were in camp, and you work in the medical field, you are helping out in so many different ways, not just the medical part. But we were so concerned, a lot of them, we had to watch the older generation, and we were told by the doctors that if an elderly patient felt that they had to go to the restroom and put their robe on and put a belt on, they said, go with them, because they were so concerned that some of them might be in depression and might be consider using the belt to end their lives, And I remember when I was taking care of one Nisei gentleman, and he said, Arama, he says, I've never had a young Japanese girl take care of me and do things like this. So it was an experience for them too, that. And then if you had tuberculosis, we had to take him to the sanitarium, But we delivered babies, and people passed away, and people had accidents and all. And I might admit that I even had my appendix taken out in camp before I left camp. But there was no anesthesia. But there was no anesthetist, I should say. And so the doctor said, well, we'll just put you under ether and take care of it. And I said, no, I didn't want that to happen. And they said, oh, okay, he says, I'll block the area and keep you awake throughout the whole surgery. So that's what I did. I talked to the doctor while he was doing what he was doing, And it can happen, But anyway.
Are there any other questions? Any other questions in the audience? We have time for a few more questions.
I don't have any specific questions, but I found your experience very interesting, and I'm very glad that you came all the way out here from Iowa to tell us about your experience as a cadet nurse. Yeah. Yes, I'm just really impressed with what you have gone through, and also telling us about your family. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I might say that when Min was at the USDA, and when we got to Ames, Iowa, and he started working there at the university, and we realized how many people in the Midwest didn't know much about what had happened to us and all. And so we started giving talks, and the And then one very, very interested professor on campus at an education department said, no student of mine is going to graduate in education without hearing about what happened to the Japanese Americans and all. And so we then were asked to speak to different colleges, different high schools, and even elementary schools whenever they talked about World War II, and also to veterans groups and women's groups and all. And my husband passed away in 2000, but he used to have all the facts and figures and all the dates and all. He was smarter than I was. And then I spoke only about how, as a, person living in camp, what we had to go through. And I'm still doing that. And I'm still giving about 35 programs every year. And a lot of the schools will repeatedly ask me to come back to speak. And I was asked to speak at the veterans camp, and there were 8 men, and I was the only woman that they had invited. And also, we had honor flights going out from Des Moines for the World War II veterans. And since I had been at an Army hospital, I suppose, for 6 months, they invited me to go along with them. So there were 300 veterans, and 5 of us I was the only cadet nurse. And I'm not I'm not considered a veteran of the Army Nurse Corps or anything, but it's truly an honor to be asked to go.